Jumping back into the action now on the Chip Shot Football podcast here, looking at more of the games from the weekend, I wanted to bring up the Chargers and the Falcons game because of not only the result, obviously, which was important for both of these teams, but obviously the performance of Kirk Cousins in this game, which was pretty alarming, right? You could say. Overall, the Falcons, for the fourth time this season, they faced an AFC team and they still have no wins when they do play an AFC team, right? You look at the Chiefs, they lost that one. They lost to the Steelers. They lost to the Chargers now, obviously. And there is one more team in there that I am forgetting. It's the Steelers, it's the Chiefs, and it's also who else? The Broncos. They got beat up pretty well by the Broncos. That's four teams from the AFC that the Falcons have had an opportunity to get a win from those results, but obviously haven't been able to do that. And the Chargers are just the latest example of that, right? They ended up losing 17-13 in this game. The loss is the third straight loss for Atlanta in their recent games, and they now sit at 6-6 as an overall record, which may not seem awful because they are technically still in first place in their division, but when you combine it with the fact that the Buccaneers just won over the Carolina Panthers and now the Bucs are back in contention for the division as well, also with a 6-6 record. You know, the Falcons messed around a little bit. They lost, a few of these games in a row, and they've allowed the Buccaneers to have a good chance at winning this division and even potentially missing out on the playoffs altogether, because the way the wild card looks right now in the NFC, if you don't have like an actual good record, you're probably not going to get in on the NFC side, because you look at where everything stands right now, the Falcons are the 4 seed just solely on the fact that they're leading their division, right? But if the Buccaneers overtake them, the Vikings are 10-2, the Packers are 9-3, and the Commanders are 8-5. So you are close with the Commanders, but if you lose another game, that's 4 games in a row you've lost, and you're kind of trending in the wrong direction at that point. So it's a tricky spot right now where the Falcons sit. But on the other side of things, the Chargers improved to 8-4. They rebound from the loss they had to the Baltimore Ravens last Monday night, and with a win and the fact that Baltimore also lost, the Chargers now jump back into the 5th spot in the playoffs, and Baltimore goes back down to the 6th seed, which is obviously important based on the matchups, right? The Ravens right now would be playing the Steelers, and the Chargers would be playing the Texans, and based on how the Texans have looked, that is probably a more favorable matchup. So obviously those matchups matter there, but the story with this game really was the Chargers defense coming up with 4 interceptions and really coming to the rescue of the team overall, because they were able to intercept Kirk Cousins 4 times in this game, and it really just wasn't all about like the Chargers defense and making these outstanding plays to get interceptions. A lot of these interceptions really didn't look great from Kirk Cousins, so there is that part of them actually catching it, right? It's a lot easier said than done, but again, Kirk and some of the decision making leaves you with a lot of worry, like I'm sure it does to a lot of Atlanta Falcons fans that have watched the games recently. So based on that performance, it was only the second 4 interception performance of Kirk Cousins' career. The other one was about 10 years ago when he was still in the Commanders and they were playing the New York Giants. And it hurts even more because of the fact that the Chargers offense only managed to have 9 points from 3 field goals they were able to get on the actual offensive side of the ball. The other points that they got was really only a pick 6 that they were able to get from their defense, obviously, right? Coming from one of the interceptions that Kirk Cousins threw. So other than that, the offense only scored 9 points, and especially with this defense that the Falcons have week in and week out, it hasn't been one of the top units. So whenever you can get a performance like this and hold the other team's opposing, offense to below 10 points, you think that you're almost going to win that game 10 times out of 10 times. So it hurts even more because of that reason, right? That you threw away a pretty good performance from your defense that was able to sack Justin Herbert, I believe, 5 times. Yeah, they sacked Justin Herbert 5 times in this game, and they were last in the NFL coming into this game with only recording 10 sacks on the year. And the fact that you got 5, half of what you got all season, and still lost, it's a very demoralizing loss. I think even more than the Broncos loss, because they got pretty beat up by the Broncos, losing by like over like 30 points or something like that, or like 20 points. It looks worse, but I think this one was a lot worse because your defense played very well, and that's not something that they've done all year. And the fact that you still lost and you didn't take advantage of it, I think hurts a lot more. But overall in the game, we mentioned Kirk Cousins. He had those 4 interceptions. He threw for 245 yards, but no passing touchdowns. He was only sacked 1 time too, so it's not like he was, fighting for his life back there. A lot of the times he looked just panicked a little bit, and the lack of mobility, all of that sort of conversation starts to be brought back in. And also, Bijan Robinson had a nice day, 102 rushing yards and a touchdown. Drake London had 86 yards. Ray McLeod had 95 receiving yards. And Bijan contributed also with 33 receiving yards as well. Whereas the Chargers, we talked about their offensive performance and how it wasn't too promising. Justin Herbert only finished with 147 yards, and they really didn't get anything from their running game because J.K. Dobbins is out for the next, 3 or 4 weeks, and Gus Edwards was their leading rusher with only 32. Again, they somehow still won this game, and Ladd McConkey had a very good game. He had 9 receptions for 117 yards, and no other receiver had more than 2 for the Los Angeles Chargers. Again, these stats are pretty crazy to read off of, and I wanted to also bring up more of these stats because they are pretty mind-boggling when you compare them, side by side, team next to team, right? Starting off with the amount of first downs that each team got. The Chargers were able to get 10 first downs, and Atlanta was able to get 24 in this game, right? You keep going, and you look at the third down conversions by each team. Both of them got 3. So, just suggesting more of those struggles, right? But you keep going down the line and reading some more of these team stats, and you look at the fact that the Chargers had 187 total yards on the day compared to Atlanta's 350 on the day, rushing and receiving, right? So that's pretty insane that they still won this game. Then you look at the fact that Atlanta ran 31 more plays than the Chargers did, and again, it was all thrown away. The Chargers had 7 penalties while Atlanta had only 2. The Falcons also had over 10 more minutes of time of possession and still lost this game. And lastly, I mentioned the sacks and how they were able to sack Justin Herbert 5 times, coming in with a grand total of 10 on the year. You get about half of that in one game, and you can't really make it much more one-sided than it was. And it just emphasizes the point and the importance of those interceptions, obviously. And this was, again, arguably the best performance by this defense in Atlanta, only allowing 9 points. And it is pretty disappointing when you put it like that, especially when all of this leads to looking at Kirk Cousins and those turnovers and how costly they really were, right? Coming at points in the game where things didn't really start great with Atlanta missing a field goal, but they forced a fumble on the Los Angeles Chargers right after they missed that field goal, and that led to the only offensive touchdown in this game by Bijan Robinson. So the Falcons actually started off winning this game 7-0, but then once it was 7-3, Kirk Cousins threw his first interception to start the second quarter, and that one only led to a field goal. So not completely the end of the world, right? There's still the whole game to play, right? Then, after the Chargers added another field goal, they took the lead into halftime at 7-9. still anyone's game pretty much, right? Not really much going on. Then to start the second half, Atlanta had the lead back at 10-9 after a field goal, obviously, when Kirk threw the pick six. And not only that, but the Chargers converted on a 2-point try. So now the score is 17-10. And then from that point on, Atlanta got it to 13-17, but their final two drives ended with interceptions as well, including the worst one of all in the end zone where he just kind of floated it to I don't know who, and they intercepted it in the back of the end zone. So it is worrying. If I was to scale it, 1 to 10, I would probably say a 6 or a 7. The more people around, the Falcons and fans are going to start bringing up maybe the idea of Michael Penix, but I don't think I'm quite there yet. I don't think I'm quite there to just say, you know what, Kirk, hit the bench, dude. Like, this is not working out because, one, you're paying him a lot of money, and you're still in first place, right? I think really that's what's holding it up right now. You have the head-to-head over Tampa Bay, so they have to actually have a better record than you, not just equal. So you do have that advantage. But, the lack of mobility is really looking like a problem. So I do understand that point. But my worry is not so, red panic button, right? Like, get Kirk out of here. I think he is still able to give you a lot of good things. The lack of mobility, again, is frustrating and is worrying. But, if this thing gets worse, and if they are in a spot where they could miss the playoffs, if, say they miss or lose the next two games, then I think you really have to throw caution to the wind at that point. But for right now, Tuesday after week 13, I'm not ready to say, move on or anything like that. And, I mean, he has the best opportunity to kind of shut everybody up because this upcoming week, they're going to play his former team. They're going to play in Minnesota, and it's going to be a huge game. What better way to shut everybody up than beating your former team, especially when they're 10-2 right now. So that's going to be a massive game. And on the other side, if they lose it, though, the Buccaneers play the Raiders at home, much less. So that's a good opportunity for the Bucs to be in first place in the division. So there's a lot riding on next week for Kirk and the Falcons, and they have good opportunities even still to kind of calm down all the nerves. So it's going to be a huge game for Kirk Cousins next week, but this one, definitely not one of his best performances. So we're going to move on from this one. We got two more to talk about on today's show. Speaking of the Vikings, they had an impressive win over the Arizona Cardinals, a 13-point comeback led by Sam Darnold. Shut a lot of people up around the doubts around Sam Darnold, so we're going to talk about that, how impressed we were with that, and our thoughts on the Arizona Cardinals too. Where do they stand in terms of getting into the playoffs? So we're going to come back with a couple more segments right after this.